What are the best odds for Super Bowl MVP in the game between the 49ers and Chiefs? And who do we like more for the passing yard props? Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy? It's time to break it down for Super Bowl 58 as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, we will get into the Super Bowl, and thanks again to you and Kate for holding down the fort on yesterday's show, looking ahead to Brock Purdy, but now we have to look to the short term, Sunday for Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes. We broke down a little bit of what needs to happen for Mahomes' offseason there on Tuesday's show, looked at Brock Purdy in totality there, his future, his dynasty value, all that good stuff for you yesterday. Now we'll focus on this game, the Super Bowl MVP odds, explore that, see if there's a sleeper we want to target there. Of course, Patrick Mahomes is the favorite. We'll look at the other players as well. We'll look at the props there that are available for Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy, as well as the running backs in this one who are going to have a key role, Christian McCaffrey and Isiah Pacheco. So a lot to do there. We'll come back tomorrow with our prize picks of the week, our last edition of the season here for the Super Bowl, as well as our FanDuel lineups for the game. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first to listen today. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league, year-round, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day as well. Now let's dive in, Michelle. Let's get into it. Let's look at the MVP board. Why don't you set that up for us first based on the latest odds, and then we'll break it down.
Yeah, so there's three top guys here. Obviously, the quarterbacks are on the top. Mahomes at plus 150 odds, highest to win Super Bowl MVP first. That makes sense, right? Put Patrick Mahomes there. If the Chiefs win, most likely he's going to win it. Then there's Brock Purdy at plus 210. I am a little shocked by this because then Christian McCaffrey is third at plus 450. I do think McCaffrey deserves to have high odds, but I actually will get into that. I think maybe McCaffrey should have higher odds than Purdy. And then there's a big jump down after that. Travis Kelce's fourth at plus 1,400. Deebo Samuel and Pacheco are tied at fifth with plus 2,500 odds. And then you just get deeper and deeper and deeper. Ayuk at plus 5,000. Rashee Rice at plus 5,000. George Kittle at plus 7,000. And you don't get to a defensive player until Nick Bosa at plus 8,000. But it's because it's really, the Super Bowl MVP has very much become a quarterback award. Sometimes wide receivers, pretty hard to win it as a defender or any other position. So I just went through that list. Which one is your favorite on that list? And obviously Patrick Mahomes has the best chance to win, but do you love his odds too as much?
Yeah, look, Patrick Mahomes, if you just want to put it down at plus 150, you are getting non-minus odds for that. So it's not terrible, right? If you think he's going to come through, but it may not be the year for him, right? I think the field might be a little bit more interesting because the Chiefs, we know how good they are defensively. So when it usually goes to a defensive guy, it's not the person you think it is. It's someone who comes up with a big interception or makes a big play, scores a touchdown. It's not always, okay, Chris Jones or Nick Bosa, who's going to take over the game. In some cases that has happened, right? In Super Bowl 50, you had Von Miller. He was the best defensive player on the Broncos. He won. You going back a ways to Super Bowl 35 with Ray Lewis. He was the best defensive player on the field and the reason the Ravens won. So he won MVP. But it's always like a weird guy, Malcolm Smith, Dexter Jackson, Larry Brown. Those type of guys win defensively. And then we've seen receivers break through, right? Especially with Tom Brady. We've seen it with Deion Branch. We've seen it with Julian Edelman. So really hard if you're a tight end, but Kelsey is a little different, right, as a receiver. So I like that McCaffrey-Kelsey combination. Now, when you look at McCaffrey, yeah, I mean, he has to be good for the 49ers to win. He has to be great for the 49ers to win. So, look, it's been a long time, Michelle. You have got to go all the way back to Terrell Davis when a rushing champion also won the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl MVP. So, this is going to be a thing that we haven't seen in this century here. If Christian McCaffrey can do it, right? So he has a special opportunity. If anyone can do it, it would be him because he can take over the game. So I like that at plus 450. You're right that maybe getting a little bit of value on that, right, in relation to Brock Purdy. So that's good to watch. And then Travis Kelce, look, people like a good story. So if Travis Kelce has like 12 catches in this game and 150 yards, and we know how bad the 49ers have been covering the tight end, what are the voters going to think? They're going to be like, yeah, let's give Travis Kelce the MVP. Mahomes has 2. Who knows? This could be Kelce's last game. So there could be a sentimental like storyline to give him that. If he has a big game, if he scores twice and has 10 catches, I think there's a very good chance Kelce gets it. So I think I'm just pivoting to the best odds for the non-Mahomes Purdy, and I think clearly McCaffrey Kelce is the sweet spot.
Yeah, I'd say those are my 2 favorite odds to go with,
Yeah.
in terms of making money. Because I think Christian McCaffrey has the best chance of winning it if the 49ers win.
Yeah.
In 4 of the 5 playoff games of the 49ers, he's had, amazing games, right? But even just these 2 games in the playoffs this year, over 125 scrimmage yards, 2 rushing touchdowns at each. Like, if he has that performance again, he's winning MVP. Unless Purdy goes off for unless they score like 7 touchdowns and Purdy has 5 passing touchdowns or something. But that's not going to happen. So I do think McCaffrey has the best chance here. I love him to win it. And like you said, a running back hasn't won in a really long time, but there hasn't been a running back like Christian McCaffrey in the Super Bowl for a very, very long time. So not really worried about that there. And then Travis Kelce at plus 1,400. That's amazing. Again, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns aren't out of the realm of possibilities for him. And if he gets that, he's MVP, kind of like what we saw Cooper Kupp a couple years ago. And the only way he wouldn't win there is if Mahomes throws another 200 yards and a couple touchdowns elsewhere to other people. And I don't expect Mahomes to have a 400-yard and 4 touchdown game. So I do love that Travis Kelce one as well. I will say my least favorite one is Isiah Pacheco. I don't really think he has like any shot of winning it. He has plus 2,500 odds. I keep seeing people and hearing people on podcasts say they really like his odds and like taking a shot on him. I mean, you have to have a monster game to win MVP if you're not a quarterback, like a monster game. That's not really what Isiah Pacheco does. He has 2 singular career games with 125 plus scrimmage yards, 3 games with 100 plus scrimmage yards and a touchdown. And we saw Damian Williams put up 133 yards and 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl in 2019. And guess who still won? Mahomes, when he didn't even have that amazing of a game at all. It's not like Mahomes like lit the world on fire, and still he won it over Damian Williams. So like Pacheco's not going to win it. But is there any player that's a long shot that you do like to win? I know we went with Kelce there, but even a longer shot than that.
Well, it's funny taking people back. I mean, this is one thing you have to look at the history of Super Bowl MVPs because some of these guys, believe it or not, are still around voting for Super Bowl MVP from way back when. So they kind of have a pattern. And we've seen, okay, if the quarterback is slightly above average but not spectacular, and one receiver goes off, we're giving it to the receiver. I think running back has been really hard. I mean, there were some cases for running backs, right? I mean, you go back. I mean, Doug Williams threw 5 touchdowns, but in the same game, he had a 200-yard rusher for the then Washington football team, and they didn't sniff MVP, right? You also had a pretty big game from James White in the 28-3 comeback, and nothing. No hint of MVP. It was the guy who orchestrated the comeback. So it is really hard to win. Again, you have to really take over the game. You have to have some explosive runs. You got to probably have 200 yards from scrimmage or something like that to make it work. So Pacheco's not going to do that. Christian McCaffrey certainly could do that, right? He could take over the game. Pacheco is not that type of back. He's a power back that they're going to put in a lot of situations with volume. So absolutely you cannot go there. I think it's interesting that you look at these tight ends. I mean, George Kittle, I mean, you could throw a dart at him at plus 7,000 if you really want to, because he's got to be a big factor, I think, for them to win as well. And I think overall, like, I do not want to go with running backs in general. Now, if you want to get a little nuts, you could go find a defensive back that could make some plays here that might have a few interceptions. Maybe it's a L'Jarius Sneed and go in that direction because, again, he can change a game with interceptions. And usually that's the type of back that gets the love. I don't see anyone like that in the 49ers. Now, another kind of long shot to me is Brandon Ayuk. I mean, he's a guy that can light it up if you give him the opportunities. But if I was going to pick between the two receivers, I think I like Debo at 2,500 versus Ayuk at this one.
Yeah, because Debo can break. I mean, Ayuk obviously can break a long one too, but Debo can do it in a running game, passing game, and you just know how electric he is. And he can change games like that. So I do like Debo at plus 2,500, but then also you mentioned George Kittle at plus 700. So Kittle has two options in any game he plays. He's either going to have 2 receptions for 28 yards or 5-6 receptions for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? Like both are in the realm of possibilities for him. And to put money down on an MVP, they have to have that insane upside, which we do know George Kittle has. So if he has a monster game, he could win it as well. I like that. To finish up the segment here, quickly give me your top 5 favorite players to win MVP in order.
All right. I'm actually going to go with Mahomes plus 150. I know that's weak, but look, I feel like they're going to win the game. And if they win the game, Mahomes is going to be MVP. So I'm going with him. Then I'm going to go McCaffrey next at plus 450. And then I'm going with the storyline that everyone wants to see, Kelsey. Then I'm going to go Debo Samuel at plus 2,500. And then I'll go George Kittle plus 7,000.
So my favorite are CMC, the number 1, pretty easily for me. And then it's Kelsey. I like his plus 14 odds more. I think if they win, Kelsey has a really good shot of winning, especially with the whole Taylor Swift thing. I know it's silly, but he's in the media right now a lot. And then I'd go Mahomes, even though it's only plus 150, but still he has an amazing chance to win. Then I'd go Purdy and then Debo for my 5th one. I think Debo has pretty much the last shot here at being a realistic pick.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's some good stuff there. And I left off Purdy. I know it's weird to leave off the quarterback, but I think that's also narrative, right? These guys are going to try to vote for anyone but Purdy if they can because they don't want to say Purdy beat Patrick Mahomes in a game.
My number 1 option would be Purdy. If I got to pick anyone to have a huge game and win, I would love to see it for my boy. But I think, they're going to try to give it to anyone else. Not really fair.
Unfortunately,
But
I mean, that narrative works both ways, right? The positive narrative around Kelsey, the negative narrative around Purdy. These guys listen. These guys write. These are some of the guys and gals who have been responsible for some of this content either way. So they're going to look at the stories sometime. And I guess you look at Kelsey, but Purdy's a good story too. Let's not forget. And if Purdy has a massive game, it'll be hard to deny him.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to get into the quarterbacks here with Mahomes and Purdy, our expectations, and if, get into all their projections on FanDuel and if he'll take the over or under or not. First, let's hear from one of our sponsors, though. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Its class-exclusive Google built-in will be your always updating assistant to call in for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone because Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Vogue is a perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8 people, an expansive cargo capacity, and an advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there for you. Is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, listeners, if you haven't heard yesterday's episode that my wife and I recorded all about Brock Purdy, go listen to that after you listen to this one. But we're going to get into Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes here. I did give some of my insights on how I think Brock Purdy will perform in the Super Bowl, but I'll let Vinnie give his. So let's start right here, the passing yards line, right? So they have FanDuel has Mahomes at 262.5 passing yards and then Purdy at 246 passing yards. Do you like both of these? Neither of these? One or the other?
Yeah, let's start. I think I have to look at them case by case. I'll start with Patrick Mahomes. I think I'm going to go under there less than at 262.5 because look, I think when you look at it, if the Chiefs defense plays well, and I expect them to in this game, we saw Jared Goff, right? He had to really work and he had to get behind in that game to push that number over, right? If they were in control, it was not going to happen. So, unfortunately for the Lions, they gave up that lead and Goff had to throw quite a bit for garbage, but that was good for his number. I think Mahomes, again, knows where he's at. You know, the run defense for the 49ers has really struggled. You know how well the Chiefs defense can play overall in this game to contain the big play. So I'm saying it's under. I like the under in 262.5. Now, Brock Purdy, this one's very tough because I think 250 is easily attainable in this game. And look, we know the Chiefs are going to be ganging up to stop Christian McCaffrey, and they're going to have to use the short to intermediate passing game. It's just going to be harder to get here, right? If you've got 250 and you're throwing shorter and the deep ball's taken away, it's going to take massive volume. But I think that volume could actually happen in this game because it'll really comes down to the yards per attempt and getting it there. And it's going to be compressed a little bit for Purdy. So I'm going to say barely above that for Purdy. I'd like Mahomes on the under. And I think I do see it as a 250 game for Purdy, and that's why I'm going there.
Yeah, I'm with you on both of those. I really like Purdy's over because even if he has to throw short, I mean, Debo can break one for 90 yards and it could have been a 1 yard pass for Debo, but he gets the full 90 yards, you know? So I really like that. He's hit it in 9 of his 12 games, hit it in each of the 2 playoff games this year. I think he hits that over. Mahomes, it's a little shakier. I don't think he's going to be too far from the 262.5, but I think more towards 240, 250. So that's where I would have him lower. And then looking at the passing touchdowns, they're both set at 1.5 passing touchdowns. So for Mahomes, it's minus 140 odds for over. So you're not making a ton of money on that, plus 114 for under. And then for Purdy, minus 120 for over and minus 102 for under. So in both of these cases, if you're to bet on the under, you can make more profit. And I actually think I like the under for both of them.
Yeah, I don't necessarily like the under. I think I might just stay away from Patrick Mahomes because it could be a short flip in the end zone and that's it. Like I could see Pacheco scoring multiple times. So I don't know. I actually might consider the unders, but it's so hard to go with under in this situation. I mean, it it really is. I mean, 1.5. I mean, the touchdowns to me are just kind of fickle here. I think if anyone would have the under, I think it would be Purdy because of McCaffrey. I don't think they'll just run in with Pacheco multiple times in the game, right? I just think they're going to trust Patrick Mahomes near the goal line. So I do like the over slightly more in this game just because, again, I think there's going to be more points than we anticipate. The 49ers will be able to run on the Chiefs and set up some things in the short passing game. The Chiefs, we know the matchups are good for them in the running game for Travis Kelce. So these teams are going to move the ball up and down. That's going to have more scoring opportunities for both teams. I think you'll see less red zone stops on either side because these teams are very good in the red zone. So if there's going to be more touchdowns to go around, Michelle, if more touchdowns there are, the better chance that both of these guys are going to get 2, and then they're still going to have maybe 1 to 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, it is interesting because Mahomes has exactly one passing touchdown in 4 of the last 5 games. Like I can see him scoring multiple touchdowns in this game, one just being rushing, right? Like he'll use his legs, and we're going to get into that. But then also the Chiefs defense has been just so good, just this season, and then also the postseason. Have allowed 3 passing touchdowns all postseason, like 1 each game. So I do like Purdy's under because CMC and Debo can steal the rushing. And then Mahomes, it's always tough to go under, but if I had to go one way, I would. Now, what about, do you think they'll throw an interception? Because at Mahomes, it's minus 105 odds for yes, he will, minus 115 for no. And then Purdy minus 122 for yes. So they expect him to throw one. And then plus 100 odds for no. I expect Mahomes to throw one, and I do not expect Purdy to throw one.
I feel like I'm the opposite on this one because I think Purdy's going to have to take more chances in the middle of the field. And you have Trent McDuffie, you got L'Jarius Sneed. These are guys that they can disguise in coverage. Steve Spagnuolo is really good at disguising things where we know the 49ers tendency is to not blitz, right? So Mahomes knows what he's going to get for the most part. He's going to be very methodical and careful with the ball. So I think at some point, if, again, the 49ers are trailing, Purdy's going to have to take some shots and hope that IU can make a play like he did against the Lions. And even if it's in tough coverage, he's going to have to trust Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk you to make a play. He's also been a little bit inaccurate, right? Let some balls sail here in the postseason. So if that's the case, I think there's a chance for interceptions there as well. So look, Mahomes is not Joe Montana. Joe Montana didn't throw one interception and dominated in his Super Bowls here. Mahomes is fallible. So, you know what? I'm going to lean toward, I think both will throw an interception. I think both are going to try to force something in at some point to make a big play. Look, I'll take the over on both these. I think
Well, the
there's going to
great
be
thing about like if you're taking the interception on Mahomes, his playmakers, tip passes all the time. Instead of catching a ball that was perfectly thrown, they can just tip it in the air. But the reason I think Mahomes throws one, he's gone 4 straight games without an interception. That streak has got to end at some point, right? For any quarterback. And he hasn't gone 5 straight games without throwing an interception since weeks 1 through 5 in 2019. You know how long ago that was? 2019. Yeah. And he's thrown 2 interceptions in 2 of his 3 Super Bowls. His numbers in Super Bowls are not amazing. They were good last year. But and then the Chiefs has only had 8 defensive interceptions all regular season long. They're not a team to really force a lot of turnovers in the secondary. So I do think Purdy will be safe with it. Mahomes, maybe one of his players will just mess up. And then lastly here, what about their rushing stats? Mahomes, 26.5 rushing yards. They have him set at. That's kind of high. And then Purdy, 12.5 rushing yards. Love Purdy's over.
Yeah, I think the Purdy over is intriguing for sure because it's so low. And look, the Chiefs actually allow about 20 yards rushing per game to quarterbacks. So that would definitely be a easy one, right? If you think you can hit the average. And look, they might say your legs were a big weapon against the Lions. So don't be afraid to take off and run, especially if the Chiefs come after you. So I do like the over there. Now, the 49ers are interesting, right? Go figure. The last game that they gave up a big rushing yard total to a QB was actually in week 18 against Carson Wentz, who ran for nearly 50 yards in that game. But they've struggled in a few of those games. So look, I actually am going to go with the over on both of these because, again, these guys are just going to find a way to make plays. Mahomes' legs have been huge in the playoffs. Purdy's have been as well. So the way these two defense approach, I think you won't have blitzes necessarily by, again, the 49ers. They'll allow some time maybe for Mahomes to get going and get some yards underneath, and Purdy could see some pressure where that could flush him out a little bit early. So there's different ways that they'll get to it, but I'm taking the over on both of these guys. I feel a lot more comfortable with these overs than I do with either of the passing yards overs.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable with Purdy's over, but I still think Mahomes hits it as well. He's hit it in all 3 Super Bowls. Yeah. He hasn't hit it in either of the last 2 games, but once you get to the Super Bowl, he's gonna use those legs.
He's just missed it. So yeah, it's been really close, and I think he's overdue. So I think we'll see it. But again, you know how much I love the quarterback rushing, especially if it's not like a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. Some of these like lower ones, I love the numbers because you can get really good value there. So we will look to see where you get good value with the rushing for the actual running backs in our final segment here with Christian McCaffrey versus Isiah Pacheco. Before we do that, we'll hear again from another one of our fine sponsors, a new sponsor. This episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is also brought to you by Robinhood, and I can't say enough about Robinhood. Did you know that even if you've got a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. And now for some legal information, claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research, robinhood.com. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show. We're going to look at the running backs. And, of course, they have different totals quite a bit in this game. So let's start with it. Christian McCaffrey versus Isiah Pacheco. Let's look at the rush attempts and yards. Where are you feeling on that?
Listen, they put it perfectly for McCaffrey. 18.5 rush attempts. I do think that's a bit high. It's like he hasn't done that all too often. Just 7 of 18 games played this season, because that's a really, really high number. I
Yeah.
mean, he's around 17 a lot, but getting to 19 is hard. 91 and a half rushing yards. I do like that. I think like the
Yeah.
2 playoff games sitting at 90 and 98. So it's a close call, but I
Yeah.
do like him to hit the more rushing yards. I don't know about the rushing attempts. And then Pacheco, he should have that. I mean, he's been getting the ball a lot in the playoffs, has looked better than his production is, I will say. I would take the over on both of their rushing yards, and I might take the over on Pacheco's rushing attempts as well at 15 and a half.
Yeah, I think McCaffrey could be the victim of his own success, where he has some explosive runs, so he doesn't need as many rush attempts to get a certain amount of yards. I think that's a little bit of an underrated thing that can happen, right? If you're reeling off some 15, 20-yard runs, it's still the same. It's just you're getting it in one carry versus 3 or 4. So I'm going to say I like McCaffrey a lot more for the rushing yard total, 91.5. I like Pacheco more for the rushing attempts total, because what do we see, Michelle, against the Ravens? They were relentlessly running him, and it was just a whole bunch of just shorter runs late in that game. So they're very committed to running him. So I feel better about the attempts that you would see in that game.
Yeah, and then looking on to their scrimmage yards. So you'd be taking into account their receiving yards with these rushing yards. They have McCaffrey all the way up at 130 and a half yards. And we can say that's crazy, but he's hit it in 10 of 18 games played this year. So over a 50% hit rate, which is nice. He's had 128 and 132 yards in the playoffs so far this year. So they put it right in the middle, 130 and a half, which is going to be difficult to choose. And then Pacheco, they have at 87 and a half scrimmage yards. I think I'd rather just roll with his rushing yards at 67 and a half, because his receiving so far in the playoffs has been 14, 14 and -1.
Yeah.
So not thrilled about him adding too much in the receiving game there. I would just stick with his rushing yards if I was going to go with one. But what are your thoughts on those 2 scrimmage yards?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to McCaffrey in the scrimmage yards. I'll go ahead and say, tied with that, I'm going to take him on the receiving yards. I mean, he can get this in one play. That's how I look at it with McCaffrey there, 33.5. I mean, he's had big plays again that they'll maybe use him as a way to get some burst after the catch. So might as well, if I'm going to take him for the rushing yards, take him for the scrimmage yards, take him for the receiving yards, where Isiah Pacheco, I have no interest in the scrimmage or receiving, because I don't know what his role could be receiving, right? It could completely disappear in this game. We've also seen him be rather inefficient as a runner. So it would be painful, right? It'll be almost watching paint dry to see if he can get to the scrimmage total where McCaffrey, like, all right, here's 20 yards, here's another 15-yard run or something. And you would feel like even if McCaffrey has a bigger total, you'll feel like you're getting closer to it at all times. So look, Pacheco is a fine back, but again, I think the 49ers will shore up a few things against the run, so it won't be as leaky as we've seen. And he's not a type of back that can take over. McCaffrey is. So I think that's an easy one for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on all that. And then the touchdowns. We got to talk about the touchdowns, because those are always fun props, right? Even
Yeah.
with like 3 minutes to go in the game, you still have a chance to hit, because you just need a touchdown. Now, I will say for McCaffrey, there's no point of betting anytime touchdown score. It's -230 odds,
Yeah.
because he
No.
scores a touchdown every stinking game. There's only been 3 games this year he hasn't scored a touchdown, including the playoffs. Like, he's scored 2 rushing touchdowns in each of the 2 playoff games. He's just a monster. But his first time touchdown score is at +330. His 2+ touchdowns in the game is at +230. Which 2 of those do you like better? Betting on him being the first touchdown scorer of the game, or him having 2 touchdowns in the game?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I like both if you could get a combination. But here's what I'll play it this way. I'll go with the 2 touchdowns, because it gives me a little bit of flexibility. It also depends on who gets the ball first and all that, right? On who's going to score the first touchdown of the game. So there's a little bit of concern about that. But 2 TDs has been like automatic for him in the playoffs. So
I know.
+230, I would take it there. Then if you're going to do that, you might as well think about the MVP, right? Going back to what we talked about. He's getting 2 touchdowns. Wait a second. He's going to be in the MVP conversation quite heavily. So you can get some value in that combination there, where I think first time, I think there's a little bit of luck involved, right? With that first specific touchdown. I would rather go with the one where I just need 2 at some point during the game, and you're getting paid out a little bit better as well.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then Pacheco, his odds for anytime score are a little bit nicer, right? You can
Yeah.
still make a profit off of it without having to put down crazy money. Minus 130 odds, right? And he's scored a touchdown in each of his last 7 games played. So that's why the odds are like that. But I actually think that's kind of fair. Put down $100, you win 70 on top of that. Not the worst odds for that. And I do think he scores in this game. But then if you want to make more money, there's the plus 550 odds for first time score. Again, a lot of that's just luck. And then plus 500 odds to score 2 touchdowns, 2 or more touchdowns in the game. Would you go crazy with 2 touchdowns in this game for him?
I can't see it happening. I just don't see Mahomes like having 2 opportunities like that, and that also presumes they'll be at the goal line a couple times. Where if they're a little bit away from in the red zone, you'll probably see a ball to Kelsey. Kelsey has also been scoring at a high rate in this one. Rashee Rice is also pretty good in the red zone. So the 2 is a little bit rich for me, but I actually might go look for the odds are first time score. Go with that. Like if the Chiefs get the ball and score, like typically they might consider deferring, right? If they win the toss, but if they lose the toss, then okay, and they have to take the ball first, then you look at that potential. So with Pacheco, first time score, like he is as good as anyone here to do that. And like, again, you're not getting value on McCaffrey at plus 330 or plus 180 specific to the first TD of the game, but first time scoring for this overall is plus 550. So I do like that quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'll say if you do want to do a first time scorer, FanDuel has a bet. It's Christian McCaffrey or Isiah Pacheco scores the first touchdown of the game. And I really, really like that. It's at plus 180 odds. So, but like if either team gets the ball first and they were to score a touchdown, my bet would be it's really Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers if they score. And then Isiah Pacheco also has a great opportunity to be the first touchdown scorer as well if the Chiefs score first. So I like taking that bet at plus 180 odds because it makes it a lot more realistic. You don't have to get as lucky with one team getting the ball over the other. And then both of these guys have a really great chance of scoring on any single drive. So I like that bet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, right. You would have examined, okay, early in the game, they're going to have some success, methodical drives downfield, get close and score. So, yeah, I do like that. It's a little bit safer, especially when you're getting plus there. No need to take that big risk and take a little bit bigger swing there with the 2 touchdowns. It's a little bit safer for me, I think, with McCaffrey. And I think the one thing you look at is also plus 1100 if he scores 3. Yeah, there you really want to go nuts if you think he could score 3 times.
It's not even that crazy to think. Like, if you told me Christian McCaffrey scores 3 touchdowns in this game, I'm not like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, that's what McCaffrey does.
Yeah, and if you're going to do that, then you have to go with less than 1.5 for Brock Purdy. So might as well. So yeah, just to go for all of it, right? If you think one thing's going to happen, then might as well try to make it a little juicier, right? If it's already a long shot here with the 3 touchdowns and you really are feeling lucky about it, go for it. Build some more odds into that in your favor. And that's always a good way to go, that have really correlated parlays that you can look at for even a bigger payoff. So there's our look at the things you want to explore on FanDuel with the prop bets. We'll come back tomorrow with the FanDuel DFS lineup for the game. So the 1 game slate to see where we want to target the players there, as well as our prize picks of the week for the last time in the 2023-24 season. So a lot of fun stuff there. We'll go a little bit deeper with those projections more or less as well. So a lot of good stuff here, and we'll have a little bit more to close our look at Super Bowl 58 previewing 49ers-Chiefs. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.